This is where my kitty lays. He screams and hollers. He lived for 5 and 20 days and cost me $50.
Pet Sematary, written by none other than horror author Stephen King, tells the story of a family who relocates from Chicago to rural Maine, where they not only discover a cemetery for pets killed on the road, but also a Micmac burial ground, which lurks behind it. This Indian burial ground possesses the supernatural ability to raise animals as well as people back from the dead. Stephen King has said in interviews that Pet Sematary is one of, if not the darkest book he has ever written, and it has had two on-screen adaptations. Those are the films I will be comparing and contrasting in this video. Hello and welcome to my cross-comparison review of Pet Sematary 1989 and Pet Sematary 2019. I am the Ranting Usher, and a spoiler alert is now in effect. You have been warned. With that being said, let me talk you to your seat. I want to talk direction and scenery. Mary Lambert, director of the original Pet Sematary, included nuances and symbolism in almost every scene, foreshadowing the horror about to occur.
Rachel and Ellie don't ever have to know.
The picture frames. The portrait of a child looking unnatural in a bizarre wardrobe, and the frequent appearances of the color yellow, which was often associated with death. Either a character was already dead or was about to die. These and other symbolic subtleties, although tucked away into the background, were so cleverly utilized that the actors needn't say a word. If they contributed any dialogue regarding them, it solidified what we've already seen without taking away from their appearance. That was showing rather than telling at its finest. Kevin Kolsch and Dennis Whitmire, directors of the 2019 Pet Sematary remake, used a similar technique, but in a more obtrusive and straightforward manner. Either method is effective and useful in its own right, but I much prefer the less obvious method, one that you may miss the first time seeing it, and thus pick up on during subsequent viewings. That often makes the film much more interesting and creepy. Now, on to the scare factor. While the 1989 adaptation may be dated in some respects, it didn't rely quite so much on jump scares. Well, maybe one. For the most part, the original Pet Sematary used practical effects, and the actors' reactions to what was happening were well executed and gave many of the frightening scenes the status they deserved. Also, Mary Lambert shot the film at a slower pace than most horror films, which in turn allowed the scares to present themselves at their fullest extent. Whether the scenes were infused with gore or they were psychologically frightening,
If he comes back, and he's like Judd said Timmy Benjamin was, I'll just put him back to sleep.
the scares had more than enough room to breathe, if you will. The 2019 version of Pet Sematary was paced much more quickly, and the scares were shot accordingly. That can elicit responses that are shocking and heart wrenching, which is all well and good. But due to a faster pace, There were two elements in particular that the remake glossed over. One being the backstory of Judd Crandall's dog Spot,
It was never quite the same dog that I knew.
while the other one,
He was a local boy. It was towards the end of the Second World War. His name was Timmy Baterman. He was killed on his way home from the Second World War. The person you put up there ain't the person that comes back. It was 4 or 5 days after Timmy's funeral, walking up the road towards Yorkie's livery. As time went by, lots of folks saw Timmy walking back and forth. But it was Margie who finally came to some of us men folks and said it had to be stopped. She knew it was an abomination.
the backstory of Timmy Baterman gave a lot of depth and dimension to the evil that lurked in the Micmac burial ground, and was rather terrifying in 1989. That Timmy was barely touched upon in the 2019 remake, he was, in fact, mentioned only once when Lewis looked him up online and then never again, was not only disrespectful of the original source material, but it was also a missed opportunity in terms of delivering some genuinely frightening scenes with today's actors and makeup artists. So here is where the spoilers I mentioned earlier come into play, as I will be comparing and contrasting the endings of both films. Following the death of Rachel at the hands of the demonically possessed Gage in 1989, Lewis was driven out of his mind with grief and went to bury his wife in the Micmac burial ground because, after all, he waited too long with Gage. It would work this time. It would work because Rachel just died. She just died a little while ago. Lewis sat in his kitchen and played solitaire while waiting for Rachel to come home. What ended up happening to Lewis was quite predictable, and yet it was still effectively frightening in that it was a sheer testament to the power of the Micmac ground, and how it was able to influence Lewis to make irrational, even ludicrous decisions to his peril. In the remake, Lewis made the same mistake by burying Ellie in the tainted ground, a mistake that endangered not only Judd Crandall, but his wife Rachel and himself as well. One reanimated corpse begets another until Gage remained the sole survivor. Unfortunately, he did not survive for very long. At least that was what was implied. Messing with Mother Nature, particularly when an Indian burial ground is involved, is always a dangerous prospect, as there are dire consequences for those who do so. The message was conveyed in both films in the harshest, most terrifying way possible. But I have to say that I prefer the ending of the original Pet Sematary because it was aimed more directly at Lewis, rather than the family as a whole. By the time Lewis had finished burying Rachel, he had gone utterly insane, bringing about his own demise at the hands of his wife. In that sense, the moral or theme of the story shone through in a way that was more poignant than that of the 2019 release. As for which movie I prefer over the other, I have to say that while the 2019 remake introduced a new twist and delivered frightening moments, the 1989 version relied on practical effects and sheer acting, which helped the horror to feel more believable. The original unfolded like a ghost story you would hear around the campfire, a rare quality too many horror films of today sorely lack. Many of the characters from the original were well written and well acted, all except for Ellie, who whined throughout most of the film and was very irritating.
I want to sew it. This, I can't remember.
Ellie's character was vastly improved upon in the remake, as the girl who played her was both more mature and a better actress. I still prefer Pet Sematary from 1989 despite her frequent whining, and I also feel that it is much more consistent with the source material. thus concludes my compare and contrast review of the two Pet Sematary adaptations. Thank you so much for watching. I am the Ranting Usher, and I would love to hear which film you prefer and why. You are welcome to leave a comment below, and if you enjoyed this video, please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the YouTube channel, ring the bell for notifications, and always remember,
Well, sometimes that is better. The soil of a man's heart is stonier, Louis.